Good morning, welcome back. It is now July 8th and it is supposed to be, for the first time this year, a really hot week with consistent daytime temperatures over 30 degrees. So time to break out the Hawaiian shirts. There's going to be a lot of canola flowering this week, and 30-degree plus weather is not ideal for them. Anything over 25 degrees, we could start to see significant flower blasting, pod blasting, so on and so forth. Lots of stress in the canola. Right now it's about 17 degrees. Everything looks pretty good. We're pretty dewy here this morning, so the canopy is quite wet, but let's see what we're finding. All right, as you can see by the state of my net, it's a little bit wet this morning. That always makes it difficult because the bugs don't really all pile up in the bottom. They stick to the wet walls. But you can see we've got some flies in there. We got a couple ligas. We got a couple loopers, one or two diamond moths. Diamondback moths. We got a couple of weevils. Nothing too bad. I'd say we're safe in here for now, but with the hot temperatures this week, the life cycle of them does speed up, and especially the diamondback moths, numbers can quickly balloon. This dryland field of canola is flowering pretty well. This is pretty much at fungicide timing. However, being dryland, I don't think we're going to go ahead and do this field. But overall, things are looking not too bad. You can see we are having some pretty decent pod set in here. You can see this main stem has been flowering since last week. We got one that's blown off down here. But other than that, pod set is looking pretty good across most of these guys. There is the odd one here and there that has seen some blasting, but I think we'll be seeing a lot more blasting this week as the temperature continues to rise. If we're supposed to be hitting 34 degrees middle of the week, there is a good likelihood of some pretty severe flower loss. Checking out my wheat plots and everything is looking pretty good. These are all heading and flowering. No real big differences between any of the plots as far as I can tell. There's no lines of, different maturity or different height. They're all fairly consistent height. They're all very consistent staging. Head sizes all look very similar. Yeah, can't really tell much visual difference at all at the moment here, but keep taking a look. This did get its second application here about 2 weeks ago now at flag leaf timing. So we'll see how things look in another week or two. These dryland peas are looking spectacular. This field is now in full bloom. We got pods kind of setting here and there. So we do have some little pods just starting to develop down here. Lower canopy still looking good. We did hit this with the fungicide. There's very little sign of disease at the moment. Things are looking really good. Excellent potential here. These are easily double the height of the dryland peas that we had on this farm last year. So growing conditions up till now have been very good, but we're going into a week of what's probably going to be heavy moisture stress, so we'll see what happens. And the south side of this field is seeing a huge improvement compared to last week. Last week this was still showing limited signs of regrowth, but after being sprayed with fungicide and some ATP relief, you can see we've had some really good regrowth in here. It's still quite a bit shorter than the rest of the field. We are flowering, things look pretty healthy, so we're off to a good restart here. Here I am back at that field of oats I showed last week. We sprayed the Enforcer M, and as you can see, results are still a little bit hit or miss. We did get pretty good control on a lot of the smaller kochia, but some of these guys that were over a foot tall, just not really adequate control at all. You can still see there is some effects going on in there, but really we're not going to get control on any sort of kochia this big. Pretty much with anything that we would spray at all, so I certainly do not hold the Enforcer M to a bad standard on this. This is more just the size of the kochia. Other than that, the oats will hopefully outgrow a lot of it and smother it now. Corn this week is looking spectacular. A lot of growth since last week. It is easily doubled in height. Weed control with the Tough EC is looking overall very good. There is still the odd surviving kochia here and there, but most of the other weed species we got excellent control on, and now the corn should be able to rapidly outgrow it, so things are looking pretty good. Still on the watch for any signs of any corn borer eggs or anything like that along the underside of the leaves, but I've not been finding anything in any of these fields yet. Now that we're out sweeping canola, it's a good time to talk about a little bit of basic health and safety when it comes to agronomists and summer students and whatnot. We're going to be out in these fields with our sweep nets, usually once a week. So if you are applying a fungicide or an insecticide, please notify your agronomist through, the appropriate software or text message or a quick phone call. let us know what fields are being done when, so that we don't necessarily walk into it right off the bat. You know, sometimes, in some cases, a plane could come through. We can't tell by the sprayer tracks in the field. We might walk into some fresh insecticide. We don't really want to have to take the time to run home and have an emergency shower and change our clothes if we don't have to. This is an issue. It hasn't happened to me for a few years, but it has happened quite a while ago. And yeah, it's not something we want to deal with if we don't have to. Well, the safflower crop is coming along pretty good this week. It looks pretty similar to last week. The tops have split into multiple growing points, and we are not in budding yet, but you can start to see the formation of what will become the bud on some of these. So they are also getting noticeably thornier to walk into. But overall, looking good. With the heat this week, this should develop pretty quickly. Well, my dryland fall rye field down by McGrath is looking really good this morning. Moisture conditions in here are still not great. There is some subsoil moisture, but the surface is getting pretty dry. You can really tell it around the edges of the field. The rye is starting to suffer a bit, but we are well into head fill now. We're moving into that soft dough stage, and things here are looking pretty good. We've got some really nice heads. I'm not seeing any sign of ergot or anything along those lines at this time. So far, potential is still looking excellent. Here we got some really nice looking dryland canola. This is down south of McGrath. Some of the temperature stress is already starting to show on this. It is 9:15 in the morning. We're already 27 degrees. So far, pod set in this field looks pretty good, but we haven't had the rain down here that we have north of Lethbridge. So I think we're going to be running into some pretty severe stress signs in the next few days as things get really good and hot. Here's a good example of some unhealthy nodules. You can see these guys are kind of a sickly greenish color instead of the usual pink. Now, I'm not seeing much other signs on this plant of disease. However, it is a little bit yellow in appearance compared to the other plants, and that's probably from nitrogen deficiency, and that's how I spotted this plant and dug it up. Now, what exactly went wrong here? Hard to tell. It could be stress of almost any kind, or something along those lines that has caused these nodules to die. I did cut a few of them open. I didn't find any signs of insect larvae inside them, but nonetheless, they're not healthy. After doing a little bit of research on those green nodules yesterday, I was able to find some information mostly about soybeans regarding green nodules, and they're basically just sick, unhealthy nodules, sometimes called parasitic nodules, caused by an imbalance of the plant feeding the nodule versus the nodule feeding the plant. So it's usually caused by drought or heat or some other stress to the plant, not being able to feed the nodule properly. So the nodule basically goes unhealthy and doesn't provide enough nitrogen to the plant anymore, which can induce nitrogen deficiency symptoms, which is what that plant was showing. It was a little bit yellow and off color. So something to keep in mind. Doesn't mean that the inoculant was no good. Obviously it was, because the nodule was there and developed in the first place. It just went bad later on. Here's one of my earliest flowering canola fields. It is now in full bloom, or even just starting to decrease. It is currently 37 degrees here right now, and the heat is definitely having some visible stress on some of these plants. You can see, even though the pivot just went through this area not too long ago, we do have some pretty limp, twisted leaves going on in here. And you can really start to see the difference between the irrigation and the dryland. There's a little bit of dryland down there. You probably can't see it from this angle, but it's starting to be a dramatic difference, whereas even a week ago you couldn't tell. Well, I came out extra early this morning to get my canola plot sprayed, so this was the fungicide timing application products, and things in here are looking pretty good. So far the plots, if you step back and look from a ways away, they are slightly taller, I would say, but otherwise staging and everything looks pretty much the same across the field. So we're going to be seeing here if we're going to have any effect on flowering, success of or failure of, with any of these nutritionals and growth regulators. So right now, whether you're in the control or in the plots, there is quite a high proportion of blasted flowers, probably due to the heat that we had. We did hit 38 degrees in this area here yesterday, so it'll be interesting to see what happens. Here we have a nice looking field of younger barley, but we're starting to see some disease issues in here now. You can see we've got some net blotch forming in here, as well as some scald. So here you can see the kind of classic net blotch patterning on that leaf. So these are flag leaves and penultimate leaves mostly at this stage. And you can see we got quite a bit of small lesions appearing in here. So we're about, probably a week or so away from fungicide head blight timing. So probably just gonna wait till then, do it all in one pass with a product like Hornet from New Farm. I will never really understand the fascination some farms have with rolling their silage crops. This wheat crop was rolled over a week ago and was a bit late in my opinion. Aside from putting, visible tire tracks in the field where we have substantial mechanical damage, even where the tire tracks aren't, there is quite a bit of mechanical damage. You can see this wheat is just not standing up like it should be anymore. The stems are basically all crimped down at the bottom because they were just a little too developed. We were in stem elongation at the time. And now you can see we actually have some of the main stems, and the tillers are actually dead because they've been crimped right off. So this field would have been better off not being rolled in the first place. Well, that'll be it for this week. It looks like it's going to be a pretty warm weekend, a little bit cooler than it has been this week, but next week is supposed to be just as hot again. So hopefully we can hang in there with the crop and maybe potentially catch a few thunderstorms out of it. We'll end up seeing what happens, and we'll see you next week.